Best dancer, most fashionable, always have on the fresh dip gear. And, that's pretty much, just like the whole look and the whole uh, representation of the culture or the culture that was forming at the time, like in the late 70s.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you so much. Yes, go for it, Yo Yo.
For us, if we said someone was fly, they were different. Like he was fly. I mean, like he had a unique style or she had a unique style. It wasn't custom for us. You could just, I mean, it was almost like a stereotype, you know.
Uh-huh.
Um, the word fly was almost like a stereotype. She was fly. I mean, maybe she just had looked different or he looked different. You know, the swag was just different. So yeah, fly meant it was up a notch.
And thank you for clarifying. And the reason why I'm asking is I feel like a little bit about myself. I'm also a hip hop practitioner, and I think like those at the cutting edge of hip hop culture are trying to be the freshest or the flyest, right? And so also when I think so, meaning innovating, taking styles and adding their own flavor to it. When I think about fly, as Pete Nice and Yo Yo just mentioned, I think about the Fly Girls on In Living Color. So I'm so happy Pete Nice mentioned Fly Girls. And what are some of the aesthetics of Fly folks? Like in that era, um, 80s and 90s, what do you remember as some of the aesthetics? What made someone fresh or what made someone fly?
Hairstyles, salt and pepper with the hairstyle. I mean, the bomber jackets were fly. I mean, the way the guys tied their sneakers up, I think he said that before. You know, y'all call them sneakers, we call them tennis shoes. The way they tied their tennis shoes up. It could have been, it was just the way they rocked the gear for me. If I saw somebody just, I mean, if he had his hat cocked to the side, it's like, okay, you over there, fly, okay, fly, regular.
Well,
It was just a different kind of swag that made you
okay.
attract. It was an attraction. It was an
You want
attraction that led to you wanting to listen, which made you want to pay attention, which made album covers become so people wanted to really look at the album covers because of the flyness, because of the style, and all that,
mhm.
all of the words we used.
Would you like to add to that, Pete?
Yeah, so like when I was younger, coming up like in New York City, you would have all the flyers for like the next show coming up the next week. And the guys who created these flyers, one of them, Phase Two, was kind of like the style maker. And even some of these terms were first used and flipped by him, and even like on the actual flyers. And there was another guy that worked with him named Anthony Riley, who's still around, who's actually working with us on some things at the museum. He was known as AR, and he actually would make flyers like these big legal size flyers where he would have characters drawn, and he would have arrows pointing to every fresh piece of gear he had. So he'd be like AJ Lester suede jacket, two-tone blue and white British walkers pointing to his shoes. Even like
Mm-hmm.
he's riding on a moped, which was like a Cougar One moped, which was the hot moped at the time, with a Kango. Like, so every single piece, represented that type of style, and it was all about style at that point. And the styles changed very quickly too, as did the music, because you look at those years from 80 to 85, and when Yo-Yo and I were young, coming up, trying to think that we could be MCs, things went in and out of style. Like you saw like Curtis Blow in, and then boom, Run DMC's in, and then it's Eric B and Rakim, and oh, look, it's NWA and Yo-Yo. So there's like a lot of different trends that are all like tied to these words that we came up with.
Absolutely. And I always admired I'm so fun fact about me, I was born on April 29, 1992, the day of the LA riots. And so I was not alive during like hip hop's kind of rise to the mainstream from the underground, but I did catch the golden era in the 90s just being a kid. And my brother's a B-boy, my sister's a fly girl. So my brother's a DJ, so I listened to what they listened to, and they were 15 years older than me. What you mentioned, the trends, the styles, when y'all were coming up individually, because I don't want to assume that you all are coming up at the same time. What was the go-to sneaker? What was the go-to fit? Maybe talk about some gold jewelry. What did you witness as you were noticing hip hop kind of happening around you in the moment?
Want to go, Yo?
I was gonna let you take it first.
Okay, cool. So when I was coming up, I went to school in Brooklyn, used to hang out at this place called the Albee Square Mall. And if you know Biz Markie, he has a song, I Live at the Albee Square Mall. And in the Albee Square Mall was this jewelry store called K&I Jewelers. And that's the spot where Kane, Biz, and all these guys, even before they had, money, and the gangster 50 Cent, the Fort Greene Mission Posse, all these guys would come. DJ Clark Kent would get his four-finger DJ Clark Kent ring. And me and my boy Lord Scotch, my boy Shamik, we shot like our quote unquote first promo photo for our group, the Servant Generals, in there, where our boy Prince let us wear the gold, like all this truck jewelry with the anchors and the revolvers. And then we took this picture that, we were trying to get like Herbie Lovebug and his guys to sign us to a record contract. So everybody was gravitating. This is like 1986, 87. And, they call it the golden era. And that was one of the biggest parts of the fashion at that time, along with like the Dapper Dan gear. And, like you look at like some of the most important albums, Paid in Full, Eric B. and Rakim, what's the main icon of that, like that big round gold eagle that Eric B had and his boys Supreme and Rap, rest in peace. That was their piece that Eric held and wore at different times. So that's where, just felt, I mean, I got my name. I feel like I'm inferior here because I'm the only non-doctor. We have all you doctors here. I'm only the prime minister. But I got my name, the prime minister, in the Albert
Hey.
Square Mall. So my boy Vanilla B, he dubbed me the prime minister inside the Albee Square Mall. So it was a Brooklyn thing.
That's beautiful.
I love it. Well, of course, East Coast, West Coast, coming up in the 90s, hip hop was still making its way. Of course, we were listening to artists such as NWA, Ice Cube, King T. We, just came out of the phase with Dr. Dre, who was with Egyptian Lover and all of them. So the style was really coming out of that funk, disco, what's his name? Rick James era into moving into hip hop on the West Coast. So, to represent their style on the West Coast, we went to the swap meet to buy the jewelry, depending on where you live. There was some swap meet, Slauson swap meet.
Slauson, Delamo, shout out to
Yes,
the
the
LA
Rama
babies.
swap meet, right, was very popular, and people went there to grab their gear. Gear was for the men. It was a clean white tee, some khakis, some chucks, some K-Swiss. Women, it was some 501 jeans, a nice fit belt, the button-up blouses buttoned down to the V-neck of your breasts, and a fly hairdo. We wore Rolex chains, link chains, what else? It was all about the khakis, the chucks, the K-Swiss, the Elise. And that's when the style started coming in, because people started really accentuating and taking that style from the West Coast to another level. So when you saw someone who didn't want to be considered NWA lover or a Egyptian lover, you kind of seen them. And that's why on the West Coast, Digital Underground was so successful, because they were able to be funky, free, and create some style. So yeah, we had different styles, and he'll tell you his style was a little thrifty. So you got some different styles from the West Coast. A lot of people just really inherited where they came from. Those that was from Oakland, tend to rock their pimp gear. So they had the silk shirt. They wanted this, it was just more of a, player thing. West Coast, we were community driven. Whatever the community we came out of represented, you can kind of see that in their style.
When we would go out to the West Coast, like we would hang with one of Eazy-E's boys, security, Uncle Mel, and he would take us to Slauson swap meets. So we would have all these customized hats made with the royalty, putting our names on everything.
Right,
So
yes.
that was like a whole nother one. And we had something similar like at the Coliseum in Jamaica, but it was just a whole different vibe out there in LA and in Compton. You know, like first time we were in Compton, we were like, we heard all this about Compton. We're like, this is like a nice neighborhood. Look at this palm trees, nice lawn. You know, so it was like culture shock for us. And then, you know, we're hanging out in Compton at night with these dudes. And we're like, okay,
Right, part-time
Yeah.
goal.
we're gonna not
When the
mess
street
around.
lights come on, it's different.
Time to go.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
absolutely, absolutely. And so I'm emphasizing style in the first part of our conversation because when I think about hip hop, I think about style, obviously in the way folks dress, but also in the way folks talk, the way folks carry themselves. It's truly a lifestyle. And I'm curious, could actually also Pete Nice was bringing this up as well. Um, the early days, right? You were talking about this specific location, the jewelry store. I wasn't able to get the name of it when you were talking or write it down. And then like Dapper Down, DJ Clark Kent, Prince Jewelry, I think it was.
It was like K&I,
Oh, K and I,
K&I, and
K
Prince
and
and
I.
Ali were two guys who were the main guys.
Got you. My question is, and this is for both of you, can you share your personal journey into hip hop? You said earlier, Pete Nice, Yo-Yo and I were trying to be MCs, but I will argue that you revolutionized MCing, both of you. And so what does being an MC mean to you? How did you, like, what was your first encounter with hip hop and how did it spark your passion to become an MC and to ultimately curate a museum on the culture?
So when I was a kid, my father was a basketball coach in New York City, and he used to coach these all-star teams in the summertime. And he would have all the best players in the city from the Bronx, Brooklyn, Queens. And I was like the ball boy on the team. And I would just tag along, go everywhere, community centers that he would work. And this is like I'm 9, 10 years old. This is like 77, 78, 79. So at this time, the first time that I'm hearing hip hop is going to a park and playing ball. But actually, these guys would have their boom boxes, and before Rapper's Delight or there was any rap records, they'd be playing like Grandmaster Flash tapes, L Brothers tapes. I didn't know who these people were at the time, but I just knew the sound. And then shortly after that next year, then you know, Rapper's Delight, Rapping and Rocking the House with the Funky Four, and Super Rapping came out, and like it was just an immediate click that it just blew up. So that's at the point that I became very aware of it, loved it, and like lifelong fan at that point. And even just going to play at the park, I remember in 1980 the song you had Freedom by Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five, and this song High Powered Rap by the Crash Crew, and they both had the same horn sample loop. And those two songs just destroyed. You go to any park to play, that was like cranking like at the highest level. So like at that point, you know, it was over for me. I just wanted to, you know, embrace the music. I didn't really think at that point, you think like, plus I'm a white kid, like, could you really think about MCing? So it wasn't until I went to high school and one of my classmates was this guy Jazzy, and his cousin was Kango in the crew UTFO who did the song Roxanne Roxanne. So Jazzy used to come in with the tapes and said like, "Yo, my cousin coming out with his joint Roxanne Roxanne. Red Alert, DJ Red Alert is gonna play this on Kiss." So like we're listening to these songs before they're played on the radio, and like we felt we had a little in with you know the scene in regards to that, and of course, that record blows up. Next thing you know, Jazzy starts his own group called Whistle, and their song was "We're Only Bugging," and he blew up. And then, like, he's my classmate, so we used to just rhyme in the in the cafeteria, just making a beat on a lunch table. So that kind of inspired me and a couple of my friends to form our own group, which was called Sinquan Nun, and we were based in Bed-Stuy because that's where my other group members, Keyway and Fresh Fred, were from. And that's how it started for me. So that's how I first became an MC. They brought me into the crew and like did our first show at this place called the Empire Inn in Brooklyn on Empire Boulevard. And we were the only group to get on because there was a couple of shots fired outside of one of the group members to another group. And they had to cancel the show where we were opening up for like Dana Dane, Sparky D, like a lot of crews. So that's That's great memories, but that's how I got into it, and that's how I actually threw Jazzy a whistle. Like he kind of inspired me to like think that I could actually MC.
Thank you so much, Pete. Yo, same question. What was your first encounter with the culture and what inspired you to be an MC?
Listen, I mean, I was just from the West Coast, just hearing, I think the first time I heard Roxanne, um,
Mhm.
that's where he's talking about with UTFO. I loved hip hop. I think we had so many men dissing women on the West Coast, and it was almost like, every word was a bitch. Every word was degrading. I mean, NWA, we loved them, but it was just, I ain't the one to get played like a poo butt. It was just, a bitch is a bitch, whether you poor or rich, it was just so I loved hip hop, but it just didn't seem like I had a fit until I started writing rhymes to defend women. When I heard Roxanne Shante come back and do that diss track with UTFO, it just inspired me. And I think it inspired a lot of other women all around. It was really, it became a national record on the West Coast. Radio was playing it a lot. And I mean, we called ourselves Roxanne Twins. I mean, then hip hop was starting to make its way. I was writing raps almost like NWA. I was writing raps almost like Run DMC. I was writing raps, almost like Roxanne Shante. And then when Salt and Pepper came out, it was like, oh, wait a minute. Oh, push it. So it just helped me create a style for something I was already doing. And being in talent shows. I think when he says trying to be, because I don't think I didn't think I'd ever become famous and have the longevity of 34 years to contribute to hip hop. Never. So I mean, just the love for performing for me. Doing talent shows was something really big during that time. And because the entertainer in me is by nature, I was in a lot of talent shows and I'm very competitive. I'm a Leo, so I was always wanting to win the talent shows. And I'm bossy, so I was always having rehearsals. We were, practicing. We were bringing in other artists. We had the ones who would make the beats for us. And like Pete said, we just started the team assembled right before our very eyes, just trying to do something that we were passionate about. And lo and behold, blew up. Name became recognized, and Cuba's leaving NWA and looking for an artist, and there I was.
And then,
Yes, you were.
Yo-Yo's talking about talent shows. So she goes from like doing these talent shows to like going with Ice Cube to perform at the Apollo in Harlem, like
Yes.
amateur night, everything. And you were right on the bill with Cool G Rap and
Yes.
Ice Cube. That was like the
Listen,
first time I became aware of Yo-Yo.
listen, one of the biggest and best shows ever in my entire life was one of the most scariest because they were saying, oh, the East Coast doesn't like the West Coast. So Cube had this big, Cube had just left NWA. We had this big tour bus. You can kind of feel the nervousness of everybody, the whole team. We had about 100 dudes with us. We had 3 tour buses. We were heading to New York to perform at the Apollo. We had 2 shows. One of the best shows. They was throwing money on stage.
Yeah, you guys
Best
brought it.
shows ever to this day, hands down. I'm talking about. It seemed like they was gonna jump from the balcony.
Yeah, it was crazy.
That sounds epic. That sounds epic. And
That's when
yeah,
I fell
so
in love with it. I wanted more of
I'm
that.
And
yeah,
we do have the poster for that show at the Hip Hop Museum in the Bronx. So
next time I get to New York, I got to make sure that I be intentional and drop by. And I encourage the students in attendance, folks on the call, whenever you're in the Bronx, check out
also
the
let everybody
Universal.
know that the museum, we've done pop-up exhibits at the museum over the past 3 years. So the actual building has been erected and built. And now we're in the course of actually designing all the exhibits inside. So the museum will open in like late 2025. So if you get there earlier, call me. I'll give you a tour of the grounds. But general public's probably going to have to wait till the end of towards the end of 25 for the full blown grand opening. I know Yo-Yo will be there bringing all
Yes, and it's
West
so
Coast friends.
amazing. It's so amazing. It's so amazing. All of the work and to know, especially to your students, to know that they are a part of history.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Yeah, so hip hop is as a culture just turned 50 years old last year, which celebrated the first ever hip hop party in the South Bronx. Um, DJ Kool Herc, his sister Cindy Campbell, throwing the first jam on record, as at least that's how it's told historically. And what was the emphasis for choosing the Bronx as the site of the Universal Hip Hop Museum? What went into that?
Well, although you can't say that hip hop was born on one day at one party, um, the name hip hop really didn't become prevalent until like the late 70s, 79. And there are a lot of things that led up to hip hop. I mean, if there wasn't a James Brown, there might not be a hip hop. You had records by a guy named Pigmeat Markham before rap records that if you heard that record today, your class can look that up on YouTube and see that, you
Can you
know,
repeat that one more time for folks?
Pigmeat Markham, Here Comes the Judge. Take a listen to that. And that's, late 1960, early 1970, I think. And you can see like the influence of rap and the Dozens and H. Rap Brown, all the tradition of rhyming, even with, I got this book here that we're going to have in the museum. This book, The Life, which is the lore and folk poetry of the Black Hustler. And you got Iceberg Slim saying that this is a stone authentic collection of toasts, which they would call them. And Yo-Yo's brother Ice-T knows all about these. And you could pick these up and put them to a beat. And this is coming out in the early 70s. So basically, the Bronx was the proliferation of what would come to be known as hip hop more because of the break beats, like Kool Herc, DJ Smokey, and most people don't know who DJ Smokey was, but he was even before Herc. And there was another DJ who inspired both of them, who was named DJ John Brown, who DJ'd at this place called the Plaza Tunnel right across from Yankee Stadium in the Bronx. And he
said
started,
John Brown.
yep,
John
DJ
Brown.
John Brown. And
Wow.
he would start to play, not manipulating on extending the breaks, but he would go for the break part and just play records differently. And Kool Herc, Disco King Mario, DJ Smokey, Phase Two, who was the epitome of all, writers and aerosol artists, they were all there at that time, and that kind of sparked them. And Kool Herc was John Brown's classmate, and then he started to DJ after that at this club called the Twilight Zone and this other spot called the Hevelo. And probably like 1975, that's when Kool Herc started, taking two records and manipulating the beat to extend the breaks. So the breaks really, for the most part, have that feel. And with the B-boys and the early breakers and the dance, like a lot of important DJs came through Brooklyn and Queens and definitely did their thing and had elements of hip hop, but it really didn't all gel and come together close to what we know as hip hop in the Bronx. And then to take it a step further, if you look at 1977, 78, that's when Melly Mel and his brother Creole and Cowboy started to flip it as MCs more differently than anyone had. And at the same time, DJ Hollywood like even led into them in Harlem and in the Bronx with a call and response and with more of a rhyme. Like you had a lot of these DJs on the radio who would talk, over the records and in between the records, and that kind of went into the club. So guys would, say, "Oh, your car, you got to move your car," or "Hey, Yo-Yo's in the house tonight. Look at her crew," and say like slick lines. And that's how Coke LaRock became known in the Bronx as the most popular MC because Herc was talking over his records too, but Coke kind of said all the slick stuff and, got a reputation. But Coke LaRock was a DJ equally with Herc at the time. They were like partners. So that's pretty much why it's in the Bronx. And there was some hoopla over this party. Now, we have evidence. We actually have index cards from parties that Herc did before that. So we look at that date as kind of like a ceremonial date. And as much as hip hop can get more light and shine on that day, that's great. But we don't look at like hip hop being born on one day.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yo, do you have anything to add?
No, I'm getting history. I'm in history
Yeah.
class. I told you,
I
listen, he's a deep historian and he's very in tune. And I love it because, you know, not often can you be a part of something and constantly learn from it. And that's what the museum and history and having conversations like this do for not just hip hop, but for any entity that is expanding. And really, we're really archiving just to go back and find all of the information. I mean, I still get information from, people say, hey, listen, I have this jacket, I have these plaques, and I hear you guys have a museum. Where do I send them? Hip hop is still in the making. 50 years old is 50 years young when it comes up to something that is going to live forever. We didn't realize how long it was going to live. And had we known that, I mean, we'd really be hoarders because the stuff I should have been through away, but thank God
And
I
Yo-Yo,
just knew it in my system. I knew I was going to need it.
me and Yo-Yo, we had a TV show called Hip Hop Treasures where we all go out, Yo-Yo goes out and tracks down the artifacts, bring them back to the Bronx. Now, we could send Yo-Yo anywhere. She would get people would throw stuff. Tretch was throwing his Grammy at her. Oh, Yo-Yo, take the
From
Grammy.
Naughty by Nature?
Take my platinum OPP record. It was amazing. So,
That's
so
beautiful.
so Yo-Yo is a great ambassador. She brought home the gold, literally, and we can't thank her enough. But that's also, she also brought the West Coast flavor where, I knew Money being and everybody, but like Yo-Yo goes right in the crib and like she's doing the Humpty dance in there, and coming back
So
with the
beautiful.
Humpty head,
Yeah, I know, right? Oh God.
crazy.
Yeah, the whole excitement of the museum is beautiful for me, and I can't wait for your students to check it out.
Yeah,
And
I can't
we
wait.
can learn more about the West Coast too. So like Yo-Yo was saying, if I'm talking about early East Coast, there's a lot of early West Coast history that hasn't been uncovered. Davey D told us, me in Paradise, about a lot of
Yeah.
early influence.
Mhm.
And you got the Poppers and Lockers out there, another Soul Train influence. Like there was a lot going on out there that influenced guys watching TV on the East Coast too. And there's a lot of
Just the culture, because
right.
LA was pretty much LA was considered, we were kind of locked into sections of Los Angeles. So, you guys moved through the barrows of the Bronx, Harlem. LA was pretty much south. So you had LA, Watts, Linwood, Compton, Long Beach, South Central. That was our section of it. We didn't really move north. And those who became successful kind of moved north and helped us change our style, because before we were just culturally impacted, which was very successful. I mean, those who got on Soul Train came back to the community and changed, because they started blending in with jazz and ballet, and then the hip, just made it even more funkier. So yeah, the style of the West Coast definitely changed and was able to expand. Davy D, West Coast, San Francisco area. I mean, KMEL in Oakland and San Francisco.
Shout out to KMEL.
Yeah, really helped us change just the culture of music, because we were starting to add in different sounds for the West Coast, because West Coast was one dimensional at one time, and it just started expanding. People started really appreciating Zap, the Gap Band, and the mixture of the music the way it was on the East Coast.
Right. And on the East Coast, we had no idea that Too Short, was selling tapes out of the trunk of his car in like 1985, early, like
Right.
how early he was and how he had his own following. So that's how you see like all the regional pockets of rap and hip hop, bubble up over the years. And that's how you get all these sounds. And you look at, you guys are in the South, like South took over hip hop at a certain point, and a lot of the foundational pioneers in hip hop came from the South. Like Disco King Mario came from a town called Edenton, North Carolina. Pete DJ Jones, who was really one of the mentor DJs for most everybody, came from Raleigh, I think, and DJ Smokey came from DC. So there was a lot of migration, a lot of families, and even my partner Paradise Gray, co-curator and the from the X Clan, came from a small town in North Carolina up to the Bronx and
You know
Harlem.
what I love so much though, Pete? The way that, the East Coast was so fearless, not even knowing what they were doing, but because the East Coast, West Coast, I always used to say we lacked culture. We lacked culture, but when you go on the East Coast, there was so much culture. That's why when you guys did the Zulu Nation, everybody kind of, linked onto it and clinched onto it, so tight because, you know, um, that's why we loved the Bay Area, Oakland, because, they were riders, they were talking Black Power, all of this. LA was just so, we were just, we really had no hometown heroes.
Right.
So when hip hop came, we started developing that. But the East Coast added so much flavor, not just to the West Coast, but all around when it comes to the hip hop culture because of the diversity of it.
Right.
So we got a chance to see it. And you had people who were at jobs making copies and doing other things that could help get the word out. Like you said, printing those posters. Hip hop took a long time to grow on the West Coast because so many people didn't believe in it, and we still had some proving to do. But the East Coast was already growing, and once the West Coast got on, the South and everybody else just was like, "Oh, okay, we got it. All right, they can't hold the West back. They can't hold us either."
And for us, one of the biggest influences to know what the West Coast was about, the LA posse
Yes.
came to New York to produce LL. And so we were in like rush with them. That was like, our first introduction to the West Coast. And they were kind of like the bridge between East and West Coast to start out. And before them, Africa Islam, who was like the Zulu King, DJ, and dancer from the earliest days, and one of the true hip hop pioneers. He went to LA and lived in LA, and made the first albums with Ice-T and did all his parties out there. And probably I think Africa Islam's influence kind of brought that culture to you guys, and then you guys built on it there and made it your own. So I think there was a lot of like collaboration between East and West Coast to get to the point where an NWA would come out or Yo-Yo would come out. So there was like a progression.
I know we're talking a lot about the artists that inspire us from the 70s and the 80s. I was digging into your musical catalogs in anticipation of this talk, and I noticed like On Wax, right? For those that don't know, On Wax means on record, but On Wax, both Pete Nice and Yo-Yo have some lyrics. So I'm gonna rap some bars. This is from Steppin' in the AM, verse 2. Straight to 88 to the curves of the 90s. I'm universal. I set a line free. Yo-Yo, and you can't play with my yo-yo says, I'm in the 90s, you still in the 80s, right? I rock the mic. They say I'm not ladylike. So there is an emphasis in your music that has been publicized talking about this transition from the 80s to the 90s. Can you talk about this cultural time period for a bunch of folks in the room, students in the room who largely were born after the year 2000? What did that era represent for hip hop, and what did it mean to be recording artists and MCs practicing and being practitioners in this era before social media? Could you try to paint a picture for young folks about what this transition from the late 80s to the early 90s was like?
I'll go first since mine's gonna be short.
Yeah.
Well, for me, being a female West Coast, there was a lot to prove. I mean, people stereotyped hip hop so much, and it was in the press a lot, especially on the West Coast. These rappers are calling women bitches, and we just don't know where it is. And then the controversy came in with the Dolores Tucker and in Congress, and there was so much talk about it on the West Coast. And then we had so much of the gang affiliation, and we had so much of the corruption going on with the LA police, the sheriff's department, and the battle ram, where these cops were just harassing the communities. They were going into their homes with guns and these army tank trucks, and there was just so much on the West Coast in the 80s going on, the drug epidemic was so high on the West Coast. People were losing their families, mothers were walking out, fathers were missing drugs, the gang banging. I mean, there were so many deaths in Los Angeles. So hip hop at that time was like, what are y'all saying? You know, what are you talking about right now? And so nobody really wanted to really address hip hop. You know, nobody really wanted to address it. So women were saying, you know, I like jazz, you know, which meant they were setting themselves apart from all the other shit that was going on in the community, which mean that I didn't really have too much to say about police going in there. I don't know what they're doing in the projects, but hey, listen, we're good over here. I'm raising good kids. They're going to school. They're not gang banging. They're not on drugs. They're not selling drugs. So the separation in Los Angeles meant that they were separating themselves from all of that, what they considered to be negative, and hip hop was considered to be negative. So when I came out, I was a writer. I was in proficiency in English programs. I was a true artist. I was an entertainer. I was in drill team. I was march with the Compton Pirates, street city drill teams. I was on a softball team. I was in drill team in school. So I was an entertainer. So when hip hop came, I was doing it already. I was a poet. I was reciting Langston Hughes. I was a poet already. I was doing the work. I had rocked the crowd already. I was addicted to music. And I felt the vibe of it. So in the beginning stages of it, for me saying I'm from the 80s, I mean, back in the 80s, you're still in, I mean, I'm from the 90s, still in the 80s, right? I rocked the mic. They say I wasn't ladylike because no one wanted to give women their props. And I had to take it. And I had to always say, I had a girl group, but the girl group, I mean, if a guy came, they went with them. So it was hard to stand in what you believed in, because on the West Coast, there was so much criticism. So when I say that, I say, hey, listen, I am a lady, but I rock the mic. And I was proud to say that because I was a battle rapper. I was always writing raps in nutrition and lunch. I was preparing to eat them up. I was preparing to punish them.
As you should be.
And on similar here, like at the time when you had the end of the 80s, even though you love Run DMC, R&B, Rakim, Boogie Down Productions, every group that came out at this time from like 88 on, you were trying to be totally different than any other group. Like, from like Ultramatic MCs, and then all of a sudden you had De La Soul, which was just totally different than anything that had come out. So everybody was trying to do, from the beats to the rhymes to just the whole themes of albums became more thematic. And then you had the whole native tongues. You had changes from moving away from gold jewelry to the leather medallions and more Afrocentricity. So there was a bit. So I think just hey, it was going from the 80s to the 90s simply like it just sounded good. But there was like a shift there, and you had the whole Stop the Violence movement with KRS-One and with the murder of Scott LaRock, which kind of pushed that movement forward. And there was my partner Paradise had the club, the Latin Quarter in New York City, and there were some incidents at the Latin Quarter that caused it to be closed around the same time. So it was just like a real shift in philosophy and in the whole culture. And that's really what, when we talked about Straits 88 to Curves in 90s, that was like a shift that definitely happened. And maybe that lasted a couple of years and then went in a totally different direction, like in 93, where you have Wu-Tang, Biggie, Nas, all these other cats coming out with a whole new like era starting like right at that point. I kind of look at me and Paradise kind of look at the golden age of hip hop that we call like 83 to like 92. And then like 93 up to 2000 is a whole nother era that represents and is great artists. But there was definitely a shift and a whole new, changing of the guard, which happens in hip hop like every 5 to 10 years.
Thank you for your insight. I'm super grateful. We are running up on time because I do want to get to student questions, but I have kind of one last question. This class or this lecture hall is mixed between, is it Intro to African Americans or Intro to Global Black Studies, and led by Dr. Kaifa Rowland, and then my class, Global Black Studies 4300, which is hip hop and contemporary African American culture. And as I've been teaching hip hop to my 4300 class, we've been talking about hip hop being Afro diasporic. You heard Pete Nice mention here, like moving into the 90s, more of a shift into Afrocentricity. And so, and even in some of your lyrics, I hear references to like philosophies from the 5% Nation of Gods and Earths. I hear references to pro-Black, Afrocentric lines in your lyrics, even I'm sorry. And so the question that I wanted to throw out is, keeping in mind that this class is for a global Black studies pedagogy group of students who are studying global Black studies pedagogy, what role do you believe hip hop plays in amplifying the voices and the experiences of the global Black community? And how has hip hop contributed to larger discourse of global Black identity? And you can take that however you want to, because obviously global Blackness is open-ended, but I want to hear some perspective from pioneering hip hop artists, from folks of your stature, as to how hip hop functions for the identities within global Blackness.
You want me to take that first, or you want to go?
You can take it from.
Okay, so you're saying, I'm sorry, I was answering the text. So how does it function? Well, for me, I think, for the Black identity, how does hip hop function for the global Black identity?
Yeah, like what role does hip hop play in amplifying Black voices? In your case, women voices? Yeah.
Well, first of all, I think that we could have never, I have a hip hop literacy class where I teach young kids how to turn sentences into paragraphs and paragraphs into essays. And it's called How to Get A's in English Through Hip Hop with Yo-Yo. It's a seminar that kids have to come into. I do the summer program too. To get young Black boys from the age of 13 to 17 to want to sign up to do hip hop, to learn how to make beats, give their summers away, give their whole summers away, where, they have free programs where young Black men are not giving their summers away from the ages of 13 to 17. But hip hop is allowing that. Why? Because these kids want to learn how to make beats. In order for them to, kids want to learn how to write rhymes. So you have kids from the ages of 13 to 17 giving their summers away to come in to learn how to write rhymes. But what we're teaching them is how to write an essay, and really creating a relationship with music, that cultural competency that hip hop has brought to not only the world, not only to this universe, but it's brought it into these universities. Every scholar or professor has to have a relationship with hip hop if it wants to have a relationship with its student, no matter race, creed, color, gender. You have to, because hip hop has been that dominant, and it has brought so many people together, young, old, rich, poor, that you have to respect it. There's no way around the world. For me, the fact that women have grown up with me, and allow I think that for me being a Black woman, and for them to understand how strong I had to be. So much going on in this world right now with sex and music, and, people being taken advantage of. To be a strong Black woman, to stand, and not have to compromised my integrity. It's due to hip hop. I'm solid due to hip hop. I came in rhyming. I came in with a purpose. I didn't come in wanting to just get on or get in. I was serving raps. My Black identity in hip hop had me strong, a strong Black woman, the Intelligent Black Women's Coalition. I created that to let them know, I'm not going in the studio to sleep with you. I'm going to the studio so I can murder this track.
IWBC, by the way.
IBWC.
IBWC.
With my crew in the Intelligent Black Women's Coalition. Yes. So I think, the global Black identity that hip hop has helped to create. I mean, it's also for, in Black men, I mean, to be able to, I mean, I remember when Cube used to say, the fact that they were pulling these people and giving them jobs. I mean, because at one time the urban community were lacking jobs. I mean, people just couldn't find jobs. I mean, and people from my community in which I had come from felt like the only thing that they could do was sell drugs, rob and steal and kill to get what they wanted to feed their families, because just the job market was closed to um, a certain caliber of young Black men. And in order for a woman to make it who was suffering, she had to say her man was kicked out of the house in order to get help. So I think hip hop allowed people to create these spaces. Oh, I'm a wardrobe stylist now. I'm styling someone. It gave them more insight. And that came from a culture of hip hop to me, from where I came from, the generation I came.
Right. And Yo-Yo and I both came from the generation which was dominated by the philosophy, like Chuck D, Public Enemy. Like, I don't know if your students today and kids who are coming up who are younger who didn't get to experience that. A lot of the labels and the global conglomerates have kind of tried to kill the opportunity for a group. Like, we have the great like rap groups, like with a philosophy behind them and a message. And you look at the strength of Public Enemy, that's really, look at how it affected Ice Cube and influenced all the artists that came after him. And I think that that's maybe something that's missing now. I know there's, Kendrick Lamar, there are definitely other artists out there, but for the strength and the dominance that they had over the culture and the entire world. I mean, we toured with Public Enemy in Europe in 1990, and it was like the Beatles. I mean, like we went to some place like Norway, Denmark. Well, the entire crowd was white, and they were like going nuts. So there was like a bridge between Black community, whites around the whole world in Europe. But at the same time, the message that Chuck was kicking was, very real, and there was a lot of substance to it, and it was front and center when it was being brought to you, delivered to you on like Video Music Box or your rap radio station. And Flavor was the character to help Chuck even deliver that even more, because he could keep your attention. Chuck could throw the message, hit you right at home. And that's what was great about Public Enemy. So the one thing I'm glad that we got to experience, but I kind of like wonder if the kids of today have or would benefit from, the Public Enemy of today, which, probably wishful thinking, but that's just because we came from this era.
I think they will. I think they will. You know why? Because I mean, I think the outreach is just so much broader, like you said. I mean, so suburban kids, so I mean, they're at more concerts than, the Black kids, African American kids are. I mean, they're really experiencing, and to hear them break it down, break down the culture to you. I mean, you know what I mean? Because they're not just listening, they are understanding the culture. They can tell you about the artist, you know what I mean? The origin, the this, they have more insight, that more impactful. So I think it is when they're serious about it, like this new generation of artists, producers, writers, behind the scenes directors. I mean, you have to be serious about it and really, in order to help the global Black identity behind anything that you're doing. Once they see that you're serious and solid, I think that no matter who you are, everyone will be affected or can be affected.
I appreciate you so much for your insightful answers. We're coming up on the hour. We have until 3:15 Eastern, and so I want to open it up to the floor because we have Clemson students in attendance. How it's going to work is I'll run a mic. So if anyone has a question, just raise your hand and I'll motion that way for our guest speakers, Pete Nice, Prime Minister Pete Nice, and Yo-Yo. Does anyone have any questions for our guest speakers? I see ruminating faces. Take your time. We can sit in some silence for a little bit. I see folks thinking. Okay, I see a hand, and then say your name into the mic and your question, please.
My name is Bryson, and the question I had was, how do you guys feel about modern hip hop? And if you guys are familiar with any artists that you think are helpful or hurtful to the game?
He said, what do we feel about the artists today?
Yes.
I'm excited about the artists today. I mean, I think that, I think the more we continue this outreach that we're on, the fact that hip hop is being celebrated the way it's being celebrated, and a lot more artists are being able to push their agenda instead of an agenda being pushed on us. I think we're going to get more of what we're looking for. I mean, I've learned along my journey, if I don't have anything nice to say, I won't say it at all. But it is sickening that the trend just won't end, because I understand, because I'm older now and I'm wiser. I understand how agendas can be pushed on you. So to see the trend of women degrading themselves, half naked, talking about their genitals and their sex preferences all day long and how bad of a bitch they are. It's overwhelming for me, and I'm tired of it. However, I do understand that when I was young, it took me some time to understand the game of music, and life is a game, and there is a game to music. There are some people that I'm listening to. I love Lady London. I love Rhapsody, of course. I mean, there's a lot of artists that I'm listening to. Camille, from the West Coast. Miu. I think she was on the road with Common. I mean, she's dope. And I mean, and it's just that women are just getting out more. Male artists, I'm just loving it. I just love the fact that the older generation of hip hop are able to speak out loud and say, okay, time's up. But the universe is gonna switch it anyway, like Pete was saying. It just happens like that. So yeah, there are some male artists. Of course, I'm Kendrick Lamar, can't help but love Drake. Lil Wayne is one of the illest rhymers ever. I haven't went through Kanye's new album. Of course, I'm always a fan. Blast, Bad, my baby got it all. Hey,
Hey, you so West Coast. It's not even funny.
Hey, I'm so West Coast. So, so I am loving music. I am loving hip hop. The fact that we have a museum coming, the fact that artists who helped pave the way have a say so and are being, their voices are being heard in media, on television, and news, in rooms such as this is going to definitely make a difference with new artists coming out.
Right.
Thank you.
And Paradise and I did with the museum this museum tour where we set up our exhibitions around the country, and it was sponsored by Ciroc, and we would have like a young artist as a guest, and we would interview them. So we had some coming like Lola Brooke and Baby Tate, and it was interesting because a lot of these really young artists really didn't even know who Kool Herc was. So it just shows the of education and for MCs and people involved in hip hop to know the history and the culture can definitely help them. And that's why we're doing the museum, because up to this point there hasn't been a central place to honor the pioneers and make them like the Motown of our parents and grandparents. And I think that hip hop is always dictated by the kids. You're always going to flip it and try to go in a different direction. It always reinvents itself. I think the one difference is that, and we just had the benefit of having hip hop as more of a culture because you were more involved in, writing and aerosol, graffiti, dancing, breaking. And, when everybody had a DJ or you had beatboxers like Dougie Fresh, it was more of a full blown culture. And now it's probably more of like a rap culture. So I guess there's a distinction between something like that can last forever, but it's also because it hasn't been, taught to everyone, on a larger level. So hopefully, something like the museum can help bring that to more communities.
Yeah, and another thing is they have to care. I hear so many young kids today say, I don't care. I don't care. Hip hop, any music industry, but specifically hip hop, it's a culture. you know, and it affects our community, whether we like it or not. And we didn't really understand that. But now that we're older and hip hop is 50 plus, you know, it's a fact, you know, it affects our community. So we have to make sure we care.
Yeah, scholar Trisha Rose says that hip hop is the culture, rap music is, or commercial rap music is the byproduct of the culture. But I think doubling down on what Pete and Yo-Yo are saying, if you want to consider yourself a practitioner of the culture, you have to do the knowledge and understand that we stand on the shoulders of giants, right? That people pioneered this before we got to 2024 and 2025. And if you're going to do the work, know who came before you. I'll take a question here and then I'll go to a question in the chat. Go ahead. Okay.
Okay, so my name is Donnie, and my question is like, to have been a part of what's considered the golden age of hip hop, how did it feel at that time to be in the midst of all that, amongst all the greatness, amongst your illustrious careers as well?
For me, it felt good. I still feel, I can't believe it. I still feel like it's a dream. I'm so happy to be a part of this museum. I'm so to be a part of history. I'm so glad that I stayed solid. I'm so glad that I have something to contribute, that I took all of the necessary, I took it serious. So, you know, and it's proof, because, you know, the worst thing you can do is be a part of a group and not be recognized. You know, so I'm grateful that I'm recognized. People know my hard work, they know my dedication to it. And they know it's not just about me. They know I do it for the culture. So it matters to me. So.
Right. And I started like everybody as a fan. So when you're that into the music and into the culture and just embracing it, then next minute you put a demo tape out there, and next thing you know, I'm playing Nerf football with Run DMC on Elizabeth Street in Manhattan. It's crazy. Like, and then you're on tour with LL Cool J. It's like nuts, you know. It's like it was a surreal time, but like you probably don't realize it as much when you're right in the thick of it. And as you know, look back, you know, you can see how incredible that time was. And, you know, really might never be another time like that, you know, with all the different groups that were coming up.
Yeah, before I take another thank you to the both of you. Before I take another question, I'll take the question from the chat. What's the biggest threat to the hip hop industry? Streaming cuts, AI. And I kind of would want to rephrase the question too, like how do you feel streaming and AI has affected hip hop coming from the record era? I mean, actual physical product to now it being digital. What do you think about that? And how has it helped, hurt hip hop?
Well, I will say that back in the day with me and Yo-Yo, and even before, if you had a record coming out, someone had to put out money, and they could lose that money if you were whack. So there was a lot more vetting of talent. So like the cream would kind of rise to the top for the most part. And now it's so accessible to everyone that there's, you know, I wouldn't say a glut, but there's just an oversaturation of, which is great because it's better to be, you know, you can have a lot more greatness come out with the playing field open to everybody, but it still is overwhelming, even as a museum, to figure out what we represent in the 2010s and 20s, because there is a proliferation of so much music and so many artists. It's difficult for us to keep track of.
And I think the AI is going to be great. Like Pete said, I think, you know, there's so many different ways, and this system is opening up so well. I mean, when we were getting screwed out of our money, and these record companies was playing games with us as artists, now listen, it's all for the artists. You know, if you work hard, you know, the proof is in the pudding. You get what you work for. I mean, there's so many avenues that artists can take nowadays where you don't have to sit back and wait on somebody to you know, screw you over. Not that all labels did that, but you know, so many artists got
No,
screwed.
they all did it. They all did it.
Yeah, period. I was
Mhm.
trying to give them a break.
Right.
Mhm. Thank you. Let's take the next question from the audience.
Hi, my
What's your
name is
name?
Hannah. And what would you say is the most observable difference in hip hop during your time versus today's time, both lyrically and culturally?
What was the difference lyrically and culturally from the time that you were knee deep in the trenches till today, to today?
Well, you know what? We were worried about being sanctioned. What do you call that? worried about being
Censorship, right.
censored. And, you know, we wanted our music played on the radio, and radio wasn't really messing with hip hop. And back when we were coming out in the early 90s for me, 1990 when I came out, radio wasn't playing. We couldn't get R&B stations to play it. We couldn't get pop stations to play it. And so it was very difficult for us to even get recognized. You couldn't get a news camera to come out and sponsor anything. You was doing the only time they were there if something negative happened, which already put another stamp of filth over the name and the art. You know, today, like I said, you know, you have just with social media, just the filth of the litter of hip hop is just rising to the top. I mean, it's almost like sucking somebody's salty neck. And, you know, and you just, that's the way you want it, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just, you know, so it's happening. Some people like it and some people are okay with it. And that's fine. But I think today's artists, the field needs to just be a little bit more wide, because we have a lot of artists that are really focusing on being great. And not just, I mean, you know, I'm not just saying staying in a culture or staying underground. I'm talking about popping it out. Pop stars, hip hop, you know, Universal, bigger than they've ever seen before, cross promoting, cross artistry, you know, not just saying, oh, I'm just hip hop, I'm just here. No, just big. But right now, what we're seeing a lot of is the people are getting what they want. And I don't know, you know, and that's just with radio, but that's why I said AI, the more avenues we have, people are streaming their own music. I don't even think people listen to the radio anymore. So, you know, people are playing their own music now.
And one thing that was prevalent and the biggest part of groups was the DJ, like the DJ culture, where you actually had the turntables and not the Serato and everything. That was a real, you know, the heart of every hip hop group. Look at the Jam Master Jays, look at the Mixmaster Ices, DJ Daddy Rich and our crew. Like it was a cohesion of the whole group. And, you know, you also had a lot of skill with, you know, separate performances that DJs would do, looking at Cash Money and DJ Jazzy Jeff. That's, you know, like almost an element in its own, like, you know, the scratching and tricks that these DJs, you know, at the top of the food chain could actually enact. So yeah, and even
Yeah.
and one other thing is it was a time where you couldn't do whatever you wanted. We had to turn down Coke and Sprite commercials because people would think we sold out. Like you would be viewed as sellout if you did anything commercial. Can you imagine that? Like I had the
Yeah.
letter, like we want you to do a Sprite commercial. We were like, oh man, we can't do a Sprite commercial, man. People, me and Serge turned down. Spike Lee wanted us to be in the movie, the Malcolm X movie, and he wanted us to play the two prison guards who roughed up Malcolm X. And we're like, no, that's not, we're not going to be the ones to do that. And, you know, you have to be very careful because you could easily get called out. And, you know, it seems like artists have a lot more, you know, you can do anything you want now.
Thank you. I got time for one more question. And it's actually from the student I shouted out earlier. So Gabriel's joined us. His aunt Donna's on the call. So I just want to say, I shouted you out earlier. I just want to say thank you for making the connection to your aunt at the Universal Hip Hop Museum. Therefore, we have Yo-Yo and Pete Nice. Gabe has a question for our guest speakers. So last question. What's your question?
Yeah. Yeah, let me stay on business. So what's your guys' thoughts on the Grammys and how the Grammy treats hip hop? Because as you've seen like recently, how they play a lot of artists, not just in hip hop, but also like Beyonce she has all those nominations and you know hasn't won the album of the year yet. We got Taylor Swift with, like has more than Michael Jackson somehow.
I don't think that hip hop really ever cared. I mean, you know, hip hop really never cared about the Grammys. I think this new generation cares more about the accolades than we did. We already knew that it was tainted. I mean, when we did Hip Hop Treasures, Pete and I, you know, and me interviewing Tretch and Tretch getting the Artist of the Year for their hip hop group and getting all dressed up in his suit, you know, and thinking he's going to the Grammys. to get his award, and he's awarded off stage without the recognition.
Right.
So artists never really cared about, Ice Cube has always been dope. I don't ever think Ice Cube got one, and they dominated a whole time period of hip hop. Public Enemy. So there's so many artists that are legendary that have paved the way for who we are and what we are today that have never ever been recognized. The fact that Houdini has never been recognized, and they are legendary when it comes to hip hop. I don't think we really care that much when it comes to hip hop. I don't know
Yeah, I
about.
mean, the management company that we were on, Rush Artist Management with Russell Simmons, we had a boycott on the roof of Rush when the Grammy first came out, and with Jazzy Jeff and Fresh Prince first win it, but yeah, Kid and Play, Salt and Pepper, all the groups up there boycotting the Grammys because hip hop was not given the proper respect. I don't think Yo-Yo, you're the one who brought it up on the show where it didn't even have its own category until Tretch won that Grammy with Naughty by Nature. And that was like 94, I think, right?
And you know what? And I sat on the board for a while. So to see the structure of how it was structured, and even to participate with the 50 years of hip hop with Grammys this year, I think was the best live or taped hip hop show that I've ever attended of an old school show in today's time, because that's really what it was for us. It was just us coming, and people just was like, hey, they didn't bring me on. Really, it was just a celebration. It was like a family reunion for us to get up there and do it. But I don't think those who came before really care that much because of the acknowledgement was never there.
Thank you both. We are at 3:15, and I understand some folks might have class to get to, things of that nature. So, like, technically you're dismissed, but before folks start shuffling out of here, I just want to can we get a round of applause for our guest speakers, please? Thank you so much. And I want to offer my gratitude on behalf of Clemson University's program in Global Black Studies. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedules to help us center the history and the culture that is hip hop. And looking forward to potentially partnering and collaborating with you both in the future. I've just began designing a hip hop recording studio in the Performing Arts School at Clemson. Like to figure out ways that we can collaborate on that, as well as maybe potentially bringing Clemson students to New York for the museum opening in 2025. So be on the lookout for the Universal Hip Hop Museum students and the good work that Pete Nice and Yo-Yo are doing. Thank you so much for joining us. We are so grateful, and we hope that you have a great rest of your day. Looking forward to connecting in the future.
Hey, Yo-Yo, you see,
Yes,
you on the wall here, right?
I saw my picture. I put my glasses on. I'm like, I go there, I go in the back. You know what's
Got
up.
the promo picture up on the wall here. You know it.
Hey, represent.